So today we're going to look at the atomic bomb, and you guys have done a lot already looking at World War II. So if you look at the board, these are the three big questions that we're going to try and address today. If we don't get to them all today, we're definitely going to get to them next class. So the first one, how does an author's point of view impact their opinion on historical events? Number two, how can we determine the validity of the author's claims? And number three, why are there discrepancies among sources about the same historical event? So to start this, we're going to look at a video, a short one, on the atomic bomb. So in your folders, you're going to see Diaries. This unit is one on World War II. This is one of the last lessons in the unit. The entire time we've been looking at the war's impact on America. This is Hiroshima, so this is a map of it. And what is significant about this bombing site? Why did they pick Hiroshima to be the bombing site? Ray?
It seems like it has a lot of docks, so I'm assuming that was either a shipping plant or it's where they sent out the boats.
Now the next couple pictures are going to be a little graphic for you, but you can see kind of the effects. So this young lady was near the atomic bomb site, and you can see the scars on her skin. Why do you think the scars are in this pattern that you see?
Clothes she had on.
Yeah, what you're actually seeing is an imprint of the fabric that she was wearing. So the bomb was so dramatic that it, even though she did not die from the bomb, even though she necessarily wasn't injured from the bomb, but the radiation effects, the heat from the bomb, imprinted that on her skin. Teaching history is all about looking at sources and determining points of view, perspective, using those sources in the arguments that we create, using valid sources in the arguments that we create. So the Common Core really just helps add clarity to what I do, just allowing me to take my students one step further in where I was already kind of pushing them. So as I said, on that paper are 3 diary entries that I want you to write. And you can discuss this in your groups. You don't have to do this in isolation. But I want you to consider point of view. So how is the author's point of view going to change from who they are and the perspective that they hold? So if we look at the first one, that's Paul Tibbets. He dropped the atomic bomb. The second one, I had in mind that lady whose dress had been imprinted on her skin. And then the third one is an American Marine fighting in Japan.
He knew, like, what he was doing and everything they worked for was worth the risk, but at the same time, could also be a suicide mission.
The Marine might have also been worried because there could have been like fallout around where they were because they were in Hiroshima or stationed around it.
I don't know if fallout was a thing they knew about at the time, though.
Well, Marines weren't really trained to know about all that. They were just told to take orders and wait for the bomb area to clear out.
They still could have been afraid about it though, especially if they didn't know anything. New technology could have scared them.
I still think they just would have been more focused on like the fact that we just had a successful bombing, like a major one, and the foes would definitely, like the Japanese would be really weak at the time. Probably just worried about future attacks more than the current one.
Ultimately, what is changing their point of view? What is making them see it differently?
Whether they're the person that is dropping the bomb or receiving the bomb, which could affect their life differently.
The Marine had been through Japan and saw the people living there firsthand and could see the innocent families that weren't involved. And Tibbets was just, he was uninvolved. He was in the sky just dropping bombs though.
So he's kind of has a more of a faceless image of Japan. Interesting.
Personally, I take an opposite view of Tibbets, probably seeing the size of the bomb, like the destruction it caused, probably felt a lot more remorse and distressed over the dropping and all the loss of life in comparison to the Marine, who was probably more worried about just the battles at the time.
Absolutely.
And that the Japanese would just be weaker.
Very good. So I think the next step is to kind of look at that White House press release that you looked at last night. For this activity, I just want to review these really quickly, that we're looking for Truman's claims that he makes throughout his press release and the evidence that he uses to support it. And it's pretty, he makes quite a few claims, wouldn't you agree, throughout? And then we're going to look at how he's making these arguments to us. Are they based on ethics? Are they based on emotion and feelings? Or is it more grounded in logic and reason?
He was letting them know that, we won. They may not have been there, so they didn't really know. So it's giving them confidence that we won so that they have something to look forward to for America. They don't have to worry about,
And I feel like he also justified his actions of how it was important. And then at the very end, he talked about limiting the power within it, that we don't go power crazy.
and that's important because back just before this, they're thinking that America had all the power, and that's what led them to failing. But this was the success for them, so he's warning them not to take advantage of it.
This shouldn't be a strong argument, I don't think, but because it resonates so well with the American public, it becomes a strong argument.
That's a good point.
Because just saying that we're going to get them back, I mean, it's kind of like you poke my eye, I poke yours, but it shouldn't be a very good reason to do it, but it will because that's what the American people wants to happen.
So if they're saying, here's what you did and here's what we did, what is he appealing to then?
He's appealing to the emotion of the American people.
Interesting. So that's what they said too. But if you do A, then my obvious answer is B. And so what's that? Logic. That's logic. In his
I
mind.
feel like that's logic based off of your emotions.
That's absolutely true. Very true.
So is it really logic or is it just your emotions telling you this is what you should do?
If Truman was answering this question, what would he think he was appealing to?
He would say logic because that makes him more credible.
Very good. Excellent job. What do you think he is appealing to kind of more often? Where does it seem to be his go-to? Is he using ethos, pathos, or logos the most?
He's mostly using pathos because he feels accomplished, but at the same time he wants to let everyone know why he did that, and he's bringing emotion in to make his argument stronger.
I feel like he is using pathos so much because he doesn't really have good logic for it. I feel like he's just saying all this stuff because if he used logic, then it wouldn't come off to the public as well.
So that's the question. Do you think the American public really wants logic at this time? Or, again, is our point of view and perspective really saying, where's your logic in this argument? Where are your facts? So, do you think America wanted logic, or do you think America wanted emotion? What do you think, Seth?
I think that America wanted revenge, and any type of revenge is always because of an emotional reason. So they definitely didn't really even care about logic. They just wanted to make Japan repay for Pearl Harbor.
One of the questions we want to address today is how can we as historians determine the validity of the author's claim? So I would like for you just to kind of scan the other claims and have a conversation in your groups right now. How valid are Truman's claims? Our job as social studies teachers is to create good citizens, but also to create good consumers of information. Students today are just inundated with information and sources, and so a really important skill for them is to learn where sources are coming from, who's making them, why are they making them, and then ultimately how does that impact what they now think about the event, about what's happening around them. And so the Common Core really takes that and says, here are sources, create a point of view, create an argument, but use only valid sources. And so that's really important for our students to learn, that they need to know what is a valid source, what makes someone's argument acceptable, how can they use it, and how could they use it effectively.
For example, we said the Japanese rejected the America's ultimatum, and this will show that Americans are serious about ending the war. Our idea was that by the Japanese rejecting that ultimatum, that gave him the go-ahead to use the bomb, whereas if the ultimatum was accepted, he would have had less backup in saying, okay, the bomb is still justified.
What do you think about that? I mean, it's really, I don't want to spend too much time on the what if history, but it is sort of a big deal, and I think we could find evidence in Truman's argument. If Japan had taken the ultimatum, do you think Truman would have used it? And really try and use his words. Would he have kept it in a warehouse somewhere, or would he have used it? What do you think to that? Ray, do you want to try and take that?
Personally, as accepting the ultimatum would have completely ended the war with Japan, there would have been much use to use it. And since he says himself, if they didn't accept our terms now, they'll expect a reign of ruin. That meant before that they wouldn't have needed to even use the power if the war was over.
Okay, so they wouldn't have had to have used it had they accepted the ultimatum. Truman's words himself, right? Nicole, what do you think? Do you disagree with Ray?
I disagree with Ray because I feel like if the Japanese had accepted the ultimatum, he'd already put so much money into making this bomb, and American scientists have already put so much work into it that he would want to use it anyway.
So we're going to look at sources about the atomic bomb. And again, we're looking for two things. We're looking for the discrepancies among the sources, and we're going to they're either going to back Truman up or they're going to oppose Truman.
And he said that he describes like just the sheer amount of power that Japan had behind them. They were starting to use chemical warfare, biological warfare. They had suicide subs. They had all this stuff. And due to all the Americans out in like Japanese waters at the time, all of them would have died eventually, as well as all the Japanese citizens that would have died in an invasion.
Like Mr. Buchanan was saying with the invasion versus the bomb, if the bomb would just kill Japanese people, while the invasion would kill both Japanese and Americans, so the death toll from the invasion would be potentially higher just from Americans and Japanese deaths versus just Japanese deaths, even if they are civilians involved.
But yeah, even the total death numbers were like nowhere in comparison. Like this guy says something like what, millions that might have died if the invasion took place, which is true. Japan would have fought like until Kyoto itself was taken.
It says 140,000 casualties are horrible.
Yeah, that's how much was it for both bombs?
It says, yeah, for both bombs put together, it was 140,000 casualties.
That's definitely a lot less than what would have happened during an invasion, considering it says like
It would have been American and Japanese deaths and kamikazes and stuff like that.
it says so itself in the storm. In the storm in Okinawa, 150,000 American troops died in the storm.
It's weakening Truman's argument because they're saying that it's not justified yet and that they ought not to resort to the use of atomic bombs, and Japan should be given an opportunity to surrender, which they are given that opportunity.
They're different opinions. Like they're both Australian, and one was like a diary entry, and the other one was a newspaper. And the person with like the diary entry said that the news brought like a lot of excitement upon like people, and they were excited for like the possibility of like the end of the war, and they were just like waiting by the radios, waiting for the news. And then the News Herald said that the bombing has done so much damage that they're like kind of afraid of like atomic power and like what the Americans will do with it. So it's like two different.
So it's two different sources. So you said that collectively you're kind of finding that people are opposed to the atomic bomb. So do you think Truman's kind of acting out of turn here?
Yes.
Are his claims valid?
Well, I feel like they're valid because he wrote it in his diary, so he didn't really expect anyone to read it.
I was really hearing some great conversation as I was walking around where students were pointing to one document in the series of 10 and saying, this is what this source says, and yet it's completely different than what Truman was claiming. I also heard students saying even two Australian sources have different points of view on the bomb. So they were making some really great connections that were certainly my intention, but they were kind of taking it and running with it, and I thought that was surprising and great at the same time. The discrepancies among these sources, are you seeing there's quite a few, right? That Truman is offering us one opinion, these sources are offering us other varied opinions, but let's not forget that we need to check the validity of these sources. How much can we trust them? Who is writing them? Why are they writing them? And that's a really important factor to take home, right? So what I would like for you to do is keep all of these pieces, and then next class we're going to use these sources to create a museum piece off of this. So we're going to kind of create our own story of the atomic bomb using the sources that we think are the best, most valid, and most important to creating a good story about the atomic bomb.